Hey guys, it's Shortcakey. How you doing? Hope you're doing good. Today, since I know some of y'all have been liking the creepy stuff, we're going to do 20 true creepy stories. Hope y'all enjoy. Now, as Halloween approaches, everyone loves sharing and reading their true scary stories. These stories I have here are brought to you by the people of Reddit. And if you have your own true story, share it in the comments below. The Man in the Bunny Costume. When I was younger, I used to live by the woods, and I could see a cemetery from my back porch. One Easter, I remember waking up and seeing the Easter Bunny, one of those terrifying costumes. And what really gets me is I remember smelling the wet hay. When I woke up, I didn't tell anyone, but there was an extra Easter egg in my house that my parents didn't hide. Years later, when I was in high school, I asked my parents if they ever dressed up like the Easter Bunny and came into our rooms. They said they would never go through so much trouble. Then my younger sister, who I shared a bunk bed with when this happened, says she remembers when the Easter Bunny came into our room and made a remark about the hay smell. I was terrified that we both remembered seeing a person dressed as a bunny in our room. To make it even stranger, I told the friends I sat with at lunch what happened. One of the girls was my neighbor across the street. She told me one Easter a long time, she looked out her window during the night and saw the Easter Bunny standing in her driveway. I had chills. To this day, I am terrified of people in rabbit costumes. The Ghost Babysitter. When my niece was really young, she was in a bouncer at my sister's house. I was babysitting. So I was house and babysitting, to be exact. I had left her to go to the kitchen to grab some water. My sister's chocolate labs were probably sniffing and licking her head because I could hear her giggling, and she was having a blast. I hadn't noticed how cold it had gotten. Then I heard it. A loud wooden snap. Like a thick piece of wood had been snapped in half suddenly, or a tree was knocked over. I ran into the room, and what I saw and smelled freaked me out. The dogs were huddled in the corner, whimpering. My niece was just staring at the ceiling corner with wide eyes. It was cold and smelled like Stetson. I took her and we decided to go to a different room. When my sister finally came home, I told her what happened. She just rolled her eyes and said, "That is Hugh." I was confused. She said Hugh was the previous owner of the house who had died 10 years before his wife sold it. She said he likes to follow my niece around, and you can tell it's him because the dogs freak and he gets told, and it smells like cheap cologne. I don't believe in that crap, but I do believe that feeling you get when in your gut when something doesn't feel right. Stranger in the house. In college, I would go home every other weekend to work at the job I had since high school. I would drive directly from the campus after my last class on Friday to my job, about an hour. And after my shift was done, I'd go back to my parents' house, which was out in the middle of nowhere. My parents weren't home yet when I got back from work. They often spend their Friday and Saturday evening drinking like they're the ones in college. So the house was dark, and since it was mid-fall, so was the yard, save for the light. Since it was mid-fall, the yard was dark. I pulled into my normal parking spot, got out of the car, and then turned to open the back door of my car to get my backpack out of the back seat. That's when I noticed the bathroom light was on. Was that light on when I pulled up? It must have been, right? As I was contemplating the light and reaching for my backpack, there was suddenly a very angry-looking old woman standing in the window, staring at me. We're not talking resting bitch face here, either. She was pissed off at me, and I knew it. We stood there staring at each other for a good 10 seconds when my parents pulled into the driveway and distracted me from my stare down with the woman in the bathroom. By the time I turned back, the light was still on, but the woman was gone. When the dead walk the halls. I used to volunteer at a nursing home where we had several instances where new residents accurately described former residents down to specific nightgowns or color of glasses who I and the staff knew had died in that room and complained about them coming into the room at night. Then once I was walking through the hallway and it was normally uncomfortably warm inside, but I felt a chill and goosebumps. One of the CNAs said I had just walked through a ghost. I couldn't get warm again for the rest of the day. There were flickering lights and TVs turning themselves on. Several of the staff for the same Southeast Asian country, and they were talking about ghosts and disrespect for the dead so much that management had someone come in to do a candlelight ceremony, and this lady with crystals and dreadlocks came in to do a sage brushing. Things calmed down after that. Lights stayed on better, and the residents seemed calmer. Well, that's a good thing. The phantom hairdryer. I was in my sophomore year of high school. I would usually get ready and then wait for my mother to drive me to school. While she was getting ready, I was just kind of hanging out in the bathroom with her while she was putting on makeup and curling her hair. She looked a little frazzled, and I asked if everything was okay. She told me about a weird occurrence the night before. She told me that she'd been woken up around 2 by a strange noise. It wasn't super loud, but it was pretty constant. My dad wasn't woken up by it, though. It's not surprising. He sleeps like a log. Anyway, she starts looking for the source of the noise. First checking the bathroom attached to their room, but there wasn't anything there. Next, she walks out into the hall and hears the noise from the bathroom nearby. When she walks in, she sees a hairdryer plugged in and turned on, just sitting in the middle of the bath mat on the floor. She thinks it's strange, but there are 4 kids living in the house, and she thought maybe someone had sleepwalked and turned it on. Whatever. She unplugs it and puts it away. She goes back to bed and eventually falls back asleep. About an hour later, she wakes up again and hears the same noise. She's kind of pissed off and goes to check it out again. Except now the noise is from downstairs. She tracks it down into the guest bathroom in the main entry hall. My parents' house has like 4 bathrooms. She opens the door again. There's a hairdryer, turned on, laying in the middle of the floor. She's freaked out by this point, but she unplugs it and puts it away. She didn't get a great night's sleep after that. So, she's telling me this story, and as soon as she comes to the conclusion, we both just freeze and turn our heads into the walk-in closet off her bathroom. As soon as we looked in there, the entire light on the ceiling shatters. not the light bulb, but the glass cover. It shattered, sending shards of glass everywhere. Whoop! We both freaked and got the heck out of there. We didn't know what to make of it, but we haven't really had any experiences before or since. And none of my family have experienced anything either. The nightmares. I was a caretaker of a small inhabited island off the coast of Maine, and my girlfriend and I started having synchronized nightmares about things that we have never discussed before. They involved very specific themes, and after a month of this happening, we were gifted a history book of the island that had a small chapter in the back that mentioned the exact hauntings. This is why the basement is locked. My mother was having dinner at a friend's house. It was a small old cottage that had been around for 100 years. She tries to find the bathroom and pulls on the door that is locked. The friend sees and says, "Sorry." That goes to the basement. The bathroom is over there. Thinking it's odd, my mother asks why the basement door is locked. It's always locked. In fact, don't even have a key for it. The real estate agent advised me not to go down there, as it's not been upgraded like the rest of the cottage. It's a little more than a root cellar. Fast forward a few weeks. When my mother, who works for the police department's community division, is working on a project about the history of the police department in the town. An old man comes with news clippings about various community events, as well as news clippings from the 50s about a gruesome murder. My mom was a bit taken aback. "Sorry, I forgot those clippings were in here too." "No, I know this address. It's my friend's house. What happened there?" "Oh," said the old man. "Well, that used to be my mother's house. She had been dating this man who was cruel to her, beat her horribly. She tried again and again to break it off with him, but he'd always come back. Finally, my aunt moved in with us, and my mother finally broke up with him." He starts getting emotional. Then one night he broke in and tied my mother, aunt, sister, and brother up in the basement. He shot them all in front of my mother. Then he shot her and killed himself, leaving a note that she would never leave him again. I was away at college. He started to sob. And that is how my mother's friend learned she had a haunted quadruple murder-suicide scene in her basement. She moved out a year later. The dying patient. A good friend of mine, while doing his rounds as a young intern, he is now a neurosurgeon, he had just looked in on a dying patient. After making the patient comfortable, he exited the room, sat on a nearby chair to write his report. After a few minutes, he looked up and saw this patient walking down the hallway. He called out to the woman, but there was no response. As he stood up to walk after her, she disappeared. He quickly walked toward the patient's room and saw the light under the door. He opened the door. It was completely dark in the room. So he turned on the night light, went over to the patient and felt her pulse. She had died. He swears to this day to this experience. What I saw on the country road. While I was in university, I loved finding snakes. I was a biology student, so a friend from the herpetology club showed me this road that he would cruise for snakes. Cruising is when you drive slowly down old back roads, and after dark, so looking for snakes that have slithered onto warmer roads to heat up. The road we took was about 4 miles and had around 4 houses on its entirety. We had taken a few laps on this road and were making our final pass. There are 2 houses near the beginning of the road, one at the end and one near the middle. We were getting close to the center house when we see movement on the left side of the road. There are a lot of animals, obviously, on this road, so we aren't surprised to see this. However, what shoots out is this kid, probably around 8 or 9, in torn blue jeans and a ripped dark t-shirt. He takes one look at us, and his face is a mix of fear and pain. He looked back really quickly from where he had come out, and then booked it across the road. The guy I'm with gets out of the car chasing to see if he's alright, and I pull the car up to the point where the boy went into the woods. I'm starting to get out of the car when my friend walks quickly back from the trail and just says, "Let's go, now." We hop in the car and tear out of there. He said there is a graveyard about 10 yards into the woods where there are 5 gravestones with the same death date. They all had the same last name, and one was the boy who was 9. We never came back the rest of the summer to that road. We usually would go out once or twice a week. The next year, when my friend had graduated, I took my girlfriend out to the road. We had gone early to try to find different types of snakes. Different snakes tend to move at different points of night. We got out to the house near the graveyard, and then there's 3 men doing some yard work. I rolled down the window and explained what I was doing and asked them about the graveyard. Apparently their dad's brother's family had all died when their space heater caught fire around 20 years ago. I kept pushing and asking about it. They told me the fireman or whoever does it had found all the bodies in the rubble except for the youngest son, but they assumed he was far too burned. I asked if they had a little brother, and the 6'4", 250-pound man said he was the youngest. When I gave the description of the kid I saw, they all went white. They have all individually seen a kid I was talking about, and he always runs to the gravesite. I have never been down that road again. A helpful spirit. A few weeks after my mom gave birth to me, she went to me in the middle of the night because I was crying. When she went into the room, she saw a dark figure of a man who she thought was my dad holding me and decided to go back to sleep. In the morning, she thanks my dad for taking care of me. As it turns out, my dad was not even awake then, and nobody else was in the apartment. Gets worse later on in life. Not only me, but my sister, cousins, and friends have all seen it somewhere in our home, all in separate accounts, and we don't normally tell people about it unless they've seen it, and it follows us wherever we move to, and at this point, me and my family have all learned to ignore it, though we know it's all there. The fan. When I was 12, me and my mom were watching TV in her bedroom. It was one of those really stuffy summer evenings. Stayed in the office, I said out loud. "It is so hot in here." She immediately, the fan that was sitting on the dresser 5 feet away turned on. The switch couldn't really be flipped on by accident. It was pretty sticky and required a little bit of force to turn on. Can't really explain how that happened, but I like to think it was just a friendly ghost helping out. Crying. In middle school, my friend was in a church youth group, and they often had these overnights at the church that he would invite me to, and they were actually tons of fun. Towards the end of the night, the guy who ran it, he was chill as all get out. The Lord was with that guy. would let us play manhunt in the entire church area. Places where actual mass was held, kitchen, rec hall, nursery, etc. We turned literally every light in the whole place, and we all had turned off. And it was place, and we had many tiny flashlights with us. So basically, we would do flashlight tag. It was spooky, but so much fun. One of these nights we were playing, and we decided to hide in a closet in the nursery. We hid there for about 10 minutes, and out of nowhere, we heard a baby crying. We got spooked and got the F out of there and bolted out of there. In the morning, we went back to the nursery to see what could have caused it. We figured it was one of those toy baby dolls that would cry, but we found nothing. Still spooks me to this day, but I would give anything to relive it because I love paranormal crap. Clapping. Played piano in the dark and empty auditorium back in the day. When I was finished, someone softly clapped for me. Sort of sounded like it was coming from everywhere, but just one person. Never saw them, and the auditorium was locked except for the door I came in. Bad connection. It was actually on Halloween morning one year. I lived in a small apartment with an open floor plan where you could see the entire apartment from the kitchen. I was in the kitchen packing my lunch to take to work when the TV turned on by itself, volume on full blast to some staticky channel that kept cutting in and out. I was nowhere near the remote or the TV and had no other people or animals living with me, so could have done it accidentally. Probably not the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I'm sure there are many perfectly reasonable explanations as how this happened, but it definitely freaked me out at the time. It hadn't happened before, and hadn't since. Woman in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in a small town and lived out in the country. My mom and I were coming home from Walmart really late one night and decided to take the back way home. I still had my learner's permit, so I wanted to take the road with less traffic. Anyone who has ever lived or been to the country knows how creepy these roads can be at night. I was going around a curve right before a one-lane bridge, so I slowed down in case I had to stop. Out of nowhere, this woman jumps in front of me to the driver's side of my car and starts pounding on the hood of my car. Her mouth was moving, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. My mom started freaking out and told me not to stop and just keep driving. I kept going, and we both looked back to see where she was, and no one was there. To this day, my mom and I still remember it clearly. Turns out there's apparently a legend about a woman who died around the bridge and supposedly can be seen sometimes late at night. I still get goosebumps to this day just thinking about it. Who turned on the radio? When I was about 10 or 12, I don't really remember, I had an odd experience. At the time, I was sharing a room with my sister. We had lofted beds and I slept on the top bunk. We had this stereo, and when you would press the button to turn it on, it would click, and a red light would pop up. Our beds were on one side of the room, and the stereo was on the desk on the opposite side. One night I was woken up by the click sound that the stereo makes when the power button is pressed. I recognized the sound and sat up in my bed. I looked over at the stereo, and the light blinks on. I look over at my sister, and she's fast asleep. Her bed was under mine, but perpendicular, so I could see the top half of her from my bed. The stereo is playing that white noise sound it makes when it isn't on a specific station. Suddenly I can hear someone saying, "Away," coming from the stereo, just one word, away. First it starts off soft and gradually gets louder until it becomes a yell. Away, away, away! It took about 10-15 seconds probably to build up to the yell, and then it died back down to a whisper. I thought that this was a dream. I was frozen out of fear, though. I thought this had to be my imagination, and I tried telling myself that during the whole thing. I had almost convinced myself of it until it stopped. After the voice died away, the stereo went back to static. Then I heard the familiar click, and the light turned off. I was positive I wasn't dreaming. The end. Click. I stared at the stereo for a few more moments, too freaked out to move. Looked back at my sister and saw she was still asleep, and finally laid back in bed, covered myself with my sheets, and willed myself back to sleep. Now, I can consider myself a rational person, but I had no rational explanation for this freakiest crap that has ever happened to me. This is why you should never let anyone know where your spare key is. I was 17, still living in my parents' house. Everyone was away on a Friday night, so I had a few friends over. We smoked a little and were chilling in the basement, playing video games. Two of my friends ran upstairs to get some snacks out of the pantry. A few seconds later, they came running down the steps, yelling my name. They said somebody just pulled into my driveway. I hear the dog start freaking out. I panic, thinking my parents are home, and I scrambled to hide the weed and pipe we had sitting next to the back door. I walked up the steps and looked out the window. There was no car in the driveway, but my dog was still freaking out. I went outside to see if anyone was out there. It was late, almost midnight, and cold. I was barefoot and poorly dressed. I walked around my house, shivering and nervous, and found nothing. I went back inside, took my dog down to the basement with me, and tried to relax. Maybe every 20 minutes later we heard a huge crashing sound. It sounded like something had exploded right in front of the house. We ran outside through the back door and saw a car wrapped around a tree. Right by the road in my neighbor's front yard. My dog starts freaking out again. It was my brother's car. My brother had gone with my parents to my aunt's and left his car in the garage. I ran to look inside, and there was nobody in it. I immediately called my brother, freaking out. When he answered the phone, I was both relieved and confused. He instructed me to call the police. He came home. The police came and looked around. They took statements from everybody. We hid the fact that we were high pretty well. As the tow truck was pulling my brother's car out of the front yard, the police received a call about a break-in down the street. They left an officer with us, and the left went to respond. It turns out that a group of people were going through my neighborhood, breaking into houses and stealing cars out of garages. I was in the house when the burglars stole my brother's car. I may have even walked right past him at one point. When they caught the group, one of the guys was injured as if he'd been in a car wreck. He was the one who had broken into my house. I knew him. He had graduated from my high school when I was a freshman. He had house sat for us. He knew where we kept the spare keys. He knew that if one of us was home, that the doors would be unlocked, and waited until it was just me, alone, in the house. It wasn't paranormal, but it still creeps me out to this day that the guy had waited for myself or any of my other family members to be alone in the house, and had broken in. It scares me that I was so completely unaware of my surroundings back then that I would have let that guy get the drop on me if he had hostile intentions. It makes me sick that somebody we had trusted to stay in our house while we're gone would come back a couple of years later and do something like that. The night I spent with 20 dead bodies. I once had to work a very late shift at the funeral home to prepare a body for viewing the following morning. I think I finally finished my work around midnight. Anyways, it was winter and I ended up getting snowed in at the funeral home. I had to stay the night until the plows came early a.m. to plow out. Let me tell you, it is effing creepy sleeping in a funeral home knowing there are 20 dead people in the basement. Worth the long read. 2 little girls were dancing in my bedroom. My fiancé and I rent a house together and we live alone. About 2 years ago, my fiancé and I were lying in bed. It was actually pretty late in the morning, 10:30 or 11 a.m. or so. I've been awake for about 10 or 15 minutes and my fiancé was just waking up. We lied there, talking softly about whether or not we should get up yet, or try to get back to sleep for a bit, since he had the first half of the day off of work. And it might be nice to catch up on some sleep, since we'd had a busy couple of days. He was lying on his back, staring up at the ceiling, and I was on my right side, facing him, with my hand on his chest, while we talked. In that position, I had my back to our bedroom door, which was maybe 9 feet away from the bed behind me. Suddenly, an odd feeling came over the room. Seriously, it felt like the air in the room was suddenly either sucked out or maybe very, very heavy, and almost felt like I was underwater or gravity changed. And the room seemed to almost feel like it was tilting to the side. It felt like the air in the room was pressing down on top of my body while at the same time slowing down time and making me dizzy and loopy. My ears were popping. Well, I thought it was just me feeling this, and for a moment I wondered if I was having a blood pressure drop. I get those sometimes, though still it wasn't quite what it felt like. But my fiancé said in a frightened voice that sounded like he couldn't breathe very well, and like he couldn't get out the words without struggling. Do you feel that too? What's happening? And that was when I knew something odd and scary was going on, because he was feeling the exact same thing. I tried to speak, but my speech actually came out kind of slurred, and I had to force out words out of my mouth to say, I don't know. I can't move. He said, I can't either. And I saw him trying to turn over to his side and trying to raise his arm up. He just kept saying, what's happening? What's happening? I tried to raise my arm up too and found that I couldn't. Again, it was like being underwater and in an intensely pressurized room. I started trying to push myself up to see if I could sit up. I couldn't do it. It was just too heavy. Then we both heard the doorknob of our bedroom door turning. It was turning over and over again, almost like someone was trying to come in, but they weren't jiggling it. They were trying to open the door. It was actually turning in a rhythm. It was turning back and forth, in a rhythm and about the same tempo as metronome, like a beat to a song. It was very deliberate. We were both terrified and we froze. The first thought in my mind was that someone had broken in, though I couldn't figure out why they would turn the doorknob back and forth in a deliberate rhythm, especially because our bedroom door has no lock on it. They could just open it and walk right in. We couldn't move. That weird heavy gravity feeling that was holding us down still would not allow us to move, but I was trying to. I could feel my fiancé trying to as well. All I was able to do was turn my head very slowly and look over my shoulder at the doorknob and watch it turning. I could see it. Then we both heard it, singing. Two children's voices that sounded like a pair of young girls started singing a song that I could not make out most of the lyrics to, and the only clear lyrics that I could make out was the very last word at the end of the sentence, dancing. So let me clarify what I'm trying to describe. These two young girls' voices were singing an almost nursery rhyme type song outside the bedroom door, while turning our bedroom doorknob back and forth to match the tempo of what they were singing. The doorknob is going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, click, 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 as these little girls' voices were singing. Something, 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 dancing. Something, 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 dancing. And the doorknob would turn with each word they sang, keeping perfect rhythm. I couldn't make out nearly any of the other words of the song they were singing, except the word dancing, at the very end of each stanza. And they were singing it in a way that was kind of playful and taunting. Maybe for an instance, kind of like two girls would do if they were teasing an older sibling, or their mom or dad, or coming up to a room they're in, shaking the doorknob and singing at them, just to tease. The song almost sounded made up, the way kids sometimes sing little make-up songs to be silly or playful. Just try and give you a feel as to how this sounded. It also sounded like they were laughing and trying not to giggle while doing it. So, as all this was going on, I was watching the doorknob turn as these voices sing at us, and at the near end of the song, I turned my head in a slow motion back to my fiancé to see if he's seeing and hearing the same thing. I am. And I can now see he has finally managed to be able to turn his head, and he is watching the doorknob too, and the look on his face was just, I'll never forget it. His eyes were as big as dinner plates. I never seen him that shocked or scared. His face was just white. And then the song ended. It was a short, just 2 stanzas, and then, just then, as soon as it started, the doorknob just stopped turning on the very last word of the song, dancing, and all at once, the heavy, dizzy weight had just been holding us down and making it so hard for us to move and breathe, just lifted, just went away, just like that. Suddenly we could move again, and the air and the gravity felt normal. It seriously was all over from start to finish in about 10 seconds. My fiancé sat up and goes, "What the hell just happened?" And he jumped over me, out of bed, raced to the door, and yanked it open. Nothing was there. We don't even have a hallway. It's a small house, and our bedroom door opens right up to the living room. And he just looked out into it and goes, "Nobody's out there." I got up and ran over to him and looked for myself. No one there. House empty. And our 2 cats were both backed up against the far wall of the living room, hissing and growling. They either heard it too, or even seen what it did. And from the spot right in front of our bedroom door, all the way through the living room, through the dining room, and out to the kitchen door, there was a trail of heat. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just a trail of heat. The air felt hot and oily, and you could almost see the haze, like fog, trailing from our bedroom door through the house to the kitchen door. We both checked the front door and the kitchen door, locked, both locked. We both sat back down on the bed, and we were just shaking. We just kept asking each other, did that just really happen? We both hear the same thing, right? And yeah, we both felt the air pressure holding us down in bed and making us move in slow motion. And bedroom knob going back and forth in the rhythm. And us hearing the little girls both singing. So I know it wasn't a hallucination or anything. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this. If y'all did, leave a like and comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Love you guys. Smooches and hugs. Mwah.